Summer routines live or die by how easy they are. And honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
Welcome back to Wooden Sticks. We come to you once again today from the Aquarius Home Services Studio. And this was a guy that I put on my list of must-haves on the show when I started this endeavor a few months ago. Frank Serratore is a legendary Minnesota hockey coach that has been out in Colorado at Air Force since 1997, but his roots go back up to Greenway of Coleraine. From way back in the 70s. He played college hockey for both Bemidji State and Western Michigan after playing for the St. Paul Vulcans in the USHL. He coached in the USHL, in fact, was a coach of the year in that league with both the Austin Mavericks and the Rochester Mustangs. Was an assistant coach at North Dakota, went on to coach the Omaha Lancers for a year, ended up coaching the Denver Pioneers for 4 years, and yes, even coached the Minnesota Moose after the North Stars left at the St. Paul Civic Center from 94 to 96. His brother Tom is the head coach at Bemidji, two of the best people you ever wanted to get to know, just quality human beings. And you'll hear it today in our conversation with Frank. He's just got this infectious enthusiasm and passion for the game of hockey. And if you know Frank Serratore, you'll love him. And I think a lot of people have probably seen snippets of this. And I think maybe one of the more famous ones, and he's taken a school like Air Force to the NCAA tournament 7 times. 7 times. This is a team that the deck is completely stacked against. But it's also a team, if they get in there, you don't want to play because he's a phenomenal coach and a phenomenal motivator. And his guys won't make the mistake. Like if they get in the tournament and you're playing them, you better play a damn near perfect game if you're going to beat them, even though you probably have way more talent than Air Force. Think about how hard it is to recruit to that program. And then now take a look at the landscape of college hockey with the NIL, which we're going to get into with Frank today. And of course, the portal, which I can't stand the portal, but it's the world we live in right now. And it's the world that coaches like Frank Serratore have to adjust to continue to have the success he certainly has. So there's a ton of different directions we can go today. Knowing Frank, being the former goalie like me that he is, a guy that can hold a conversation a little bit, we're probably going to go long. I'm going to apologize on the front end for that. And I'm going to leave you in this first segment with one of my favorite quotes from Frank that you probably saw on YouTube or on social media because it blew up, and rightfully so. I'm going to get the context wrong. I might not have the exact verbiage, but here's how it kind of went. Tough loss for Air Force. I want to say it was either to get in the NCAA tournament or it was actually once the tournament had started. And, you know, those coach press conferences, they've got a room full of reporters and there's the coach up on the stage and Frank is there with his unbelievable personality. And one of the reporters asked how tough it was to deal with this particular loss. And Frank, deep breath, paused and said, well, it isn't like I'm going to go out there and jump off a bridge. Another long pause, looked directly at the reporter, but he goes, I do have a bridge picked out. I mean, just unbelievably, I mean, right off the cuff, right? I mean, there's that, you know, that personality, that charm, that wit coming out. That's what we're going to have today. It's going to be a ton of fun. I can't wait to reconnect with Frankie. I've known him for the better part of almost 4 decades. So we've got all kinds of weird connections, which we'll get into, and that's going to happen here shortly. First off, I want to make you a part of the show. I want to get your business here and elevate, and Karen Cleary can do that. So get a hold of her at kcleary@talknorth.com. I've talked about her before. If you've listened to the show, you know what I'm talking about. We need more sponsors, and we'd love you to be a part of the show. But one of our key sponsors starts with my friend John Schweitz, a dear friend of mine who I went to St. Thomas with, and he's a part of the Freemasons. And yeah, the Freemasons, we know about the pancake breakfasts and the secret handshakes, but really what sets them apart with Minnesota Masonic Charities is all the work they do right here in our community, specifically in Minnesota. They've got the Cancer Center, they've got the hospital over at the U of M, they've got Masonic Children's, they've got the home in Bloomington. They are spectacular what they do, and it's all such important work right now that the Freemasons are doing. They're the largest fraternal organization in the world, and they always answer the call when those needs come in. A lot of times those needs revolve around money, and they take care of people in need. So I am so grateful to John Schweitz and the Minnesota Masons and all their great charity as they are part of this show. Up next, though, as promised, the head coach of the Air Force Falcons, the incomparable and unbelievable, so much fun, Frank Serratore, next here on Wooden Sticks. Welcome back to Wooden Sticks, coming to you today live from the Aquarius Home Services studio. Very excited, as I mentioned in my intro, to talk to today's guest. I've known Frankie for, well, it's been almost 40 years. Head coach of the Air Force Falcons, longtime Minnesota hockey player, coach, and legend, Frank Serratore. Frankie, it is great to reconnect.
Gorgie, great to be on with you. It's always great to be on with one of the goalie union. At least those of us, another one of us that's still alive anyway, you know. And but no, we go back a long ways. Probably go back farther. I go back farther with you than you do with me, because I remember you playing high school on that championship team with Burnsville and Scotty Bloom. My God, was he a good player, you know? And
yeah, it was fun.
Oh God, and you know. Tom Osiki was the coach of that team, and what a great guy he was. And we were talking about the legends, that article that went out the other day about Surdy and with Surdy, and mentioned all the old timers, and we lost Wooger, and we've lost several of them now. But you know, you go back to the high school ranks, and Tommy Osiki and Tommy Soderdahl and Terry Skripek, who you played for at St. Thomas. I mean, great guys and legendary coaches. So it's just not at the Division I coaching level. You know, there's legends. You go all the way down to, you know, Donnie Roberts and the guy. There was all those guys at Eddie Saugestad, and those guys at the Division 2 and 3 level, and then their high schools. I mean, we're very blessed to have. We're so blessed to have, you know, such a great tradition and such a great fan base in the state of Minnesota that remembers all those guys, you know. And no, it's really cool.
Yeah, our paths even crossed in the USHL when you were the head coach of the Rochester Mustangs. My former teammate at Burnsville, Herm Finnegan, was a part of that team. I played for Jim Wiley, who ended up coaching in the National Hockey League, the late great, another one we lost way too early in Coach Wiley. But I played for the bottom dwellers, the Des Moines Buccaneers. I think we won 8 games that entire year, but one of our 8 wins was late in the year. And my dad and Herm Finnegan's dad were best friends during our time at BHS, and they drove down to the game together. They went to Newt's and had a burger and watched us beat you in a game that featured a penalty shot that I want to say Herm Finnegan took, and we won, I think, a 5-4 hockey game down at the rec center in Rochester. And when you only win 8 out of like 72 games, you remember those 8 wins because you didn't have very many, but it was a highlight for me because of that connection to Hermie.
Absolutely. You went from the outhouse to the penthouse, going from the state championship, winning the state championship in Minnesota, to going into Des Moines. Jimmy Wiley, what a great guy. Like Jimmy was so laid back, and I was wound so tight. We'd work summer camps together for Chuck Grillo, and Jimmy was just like, and then we were in the International League. Jimmy was in Kansas City when I was with the Moose here in Minnesota, and Jimmy was just so laid back, and of course me wound tighter than a piano string. But now what a really good guy, and Herm Finnegan, what a little shit he was. I mean. What a great little player. You know, if he's on your team, you love him. If he's on your team, you love him. If he's on the other team, you hated him. He was he was a little bit of a crap disturber, and but uh, he was a he was a very he was an energy guy, and he got after it, and he also had some skill. And but I loved coaching Herm. I'm glad that he was on our team. I remember that in the U.S. That's where obviously I remember you at Burnsville, but then when you went down to Des Moines there with that group, and you had
We were terrible.
well, you were, but you know what? There was a great player on there that he was young at the time. Remember? Well, of course you do. Bobby Nardello, I believe, was on that
Oh
team,
yeah,
wasn't he?
Chicago
Yeah.
kid.
Oh, was and he ended up playing a long. He ended up playing pro hockey for a long time. Not necessarily at the NHL, but he played in Italy, played all over, and uh, little. You know, he would have been a better. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gorgie. He would have been a way better player in today's game than back then when, you know, guys like that, undersized defensemen, there you had some in college, but there wasn't, you know, with the exception of maybe a Kurt Giles, there wasn't many of them playing in the NHL. And I think he had it all except size, and he was short, but he had a big long stick, and man, could he see the ice? And but it's weird. I'm getting old now. I got Parkinson's disease. I can remember stuff from the '80s and the '70s, '80s, and '90s better than right now. I can't remember hardly my own players' names, but I can remember every player that played for me that I played with in the '70s and who played for me in the '80s and '90s. Here's a question for you: how did you guys get Donnie Granato on your team in Burnsville?
That is a great question. It's come up before. And so the Granado family, their dad ran the Stroh Brewery down in Chicago, and they were hockey junkies. You know, Tony through Donnie down to Robbie, the entire family. Of course, Cammy Granado, a big part of that as well. And so they had heard about the legendary state tournament in Minnesota. And so in the early to mid '80s, Burnsville finally had kind of made that pivot from being an also ran to starting to become a power. And in '83, Burnsville made it to their first state tournament. I was a sophomore. I was on the junior varsity, but Coach Osiki had this program that was on the rise. So the Granado family looked at the state tournament and then looked at teams that had programs that were sitting on maybe an influential run. They bought a house in Burnsville, literally less than a mile from where I grew up. In fact, my parents still live there. And they had two houses. They had one in Chicago where their dad lived and ran the Stroh Brewery, and their mom moved here so the kids could play hockey. And so Donnie got to Burnsville, and he was, it was the summer before his senior year. And it was a big deal because, nowadays we deal with open enrollment on the high school level, just like you guys deal with the portal in college, and we'll get to that. But this was not something that was very common. And he moved in and became our second line center. Herm Finnegan was the anchor on our top line with Kelly Ramswick and John Burrell. But imagine having a player of the caliber of Donnie Granato as your second line center. I'll preface it this way, Frank. Our fourth line center that year was a guy named Kevin Featherstone. He scored 27 goals as our fourth line center.
Oh
We
my
were
God.
loaded. I had a great
Yeah.
seat. Honestly, I didn't have to do much. And so I went from being almost a passenger. I mean, I saw 15, 20 shots a night at Burnsville. And you mentioned going from the penthouse to the outhouse. I averaged seeing 52 and a half shots per night that next year in Iowa. And truthfully, it was an unbelievably important year for me, for my development, because at Burnsville, I was very well protected. And in Des Moines, it was just the opposite. And I finally got a chance to blossom and build my skills, and playing for a guy like Jim Wiley and getting peppered every night. Your background takes you through all kinds of tentacles in the USHL,
Oh,
and
and
the league
all
was great
over.
back
Yeah.
then. But
Oh, and all
imagine where
over.
the league is now. I mean, think about
Oh,
how good that league has become.
yeah, no, it's I think it's the best junior league in the world right now, and the proof is in the pudding with all the players that go on. But Donnie Granato, like Tony was his brother. Tony was great right from the get go. He was a great high schooler. He was kind of a fast tracker. Donnie was a bit of a late bloomer, and
Mm-hmm.
he was with you guys, and then he went to Madison and played for the Caps. I think for Scotty Owens or Bobby Suter. I can't remember who exactly was in charge, but you look back on the rosters those days. I was just talking to Jack Barzee the other day, and we were going through all those early years when I was down there, and he was in Dubuque, and Corey Wright and Steve McSwain and Gary Suter, like he had them stacked up like cordwood in Dubuque. That team that you played against in Rochester, and by the way, you guys won that game in Rochester. We didn't lose many that year, and we didn't lose many at home. And our three captains, like you look back the 85, 86 Rochester Mustang. Our three captains was one guy was named of Mike Hastings, was one of our captains.
Wow.
Little right shot power play defenseman who now has a pretty good coaching job in college hockey. My wife's cousin, Peter Stauber, who's a congressman now, and Pete was on that. And then our other captain was a guy named Ralph Barahona, who's from California.
I know who he is. Yes.
You bet. And Ralphie ended up playing some games with the Boston Bruins. But the league has obviously come light years. To be honest with you, I give my old one of my old mentors, Gino Gasparini, a lot of credit for when he got involved, when he was done at North Dakota and got involved with Butch Johnson and those guys in the USHL. He did a lot because we were a second tier junior league to the BCHL, to the Alberta League, to the Saskatchewan League. We were kind of a B league to that. And we would always, I remember trying to get Stevie Johnson and from Grand Forks, but they sent him up north. But Gino, when he took over that USHL, that's when I was gone. Then I was in college, but and in pro. But he helped take that league to another level. And now, to be honest with you, like you can say what you want about major, junior, or this or that. Like I believe the USHL is the best junior league in the world. And those teams are deep. And also, Gorgie, just think now how many more players there are from USA Hockey. Back there wasn't many Americans. There wasn't nearly the number of Americans. Hey, I always say, if you weren't from one of the 3Ms, Minnesota, Michigan, or Massachusetts, you really couldn't play. Now we got players from all over, California, Florida. I had a kid named Jeff Hayner from Las Vegas, Nevada, the best home visit I ever made. I stayed at the Bellagio. So right now, that league is great because we're attracting all the best players, and even the best Canadians are coming down to play that league that want to go to college. But back then there wasn't as many Americans. The top, Stevie Johnson, Eddie Olchuk, those guys all went up to Canada to play in those days. If that was today, they'd be in the USHL right now. But we need to be proud about those early years because we were the pioneers, the coaches at the time, the players that played in that league. And it wasn't easy, Gorgie, for a guy like you. You're at Burnsville. It was getting to be more the thing to do, but it wasn't like it was automatic. Kids' dream was still to go from high school directly to college. But the guys that were really hungry, the guys that really wanted it. Hey, I played in the early years with the old St. Paul Vulcans, and nobody hardly was playing junior at that time. I came down and I played 2 years for Dougie Woog, and Kevin Hartzell was a teammate of mine. But people would kind of ask you, like, what are you doing? And I go, I'm playing junior hockey. They go, well, what's junior hockey? I go, well, it's kind of like junior college without the college,
Yeah, exactly. No, I got that at my grad party. People were like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going to go down to play hockey in Des Moines, Iowa. They were looking at me like I was from another planet, but it was an unbelievable experience. I mean, the hockey speaks for itself. Living on your own for the first time with the billet families, it really changed my life. It was the most impactful year of my young time. I'd been pretty sheltered in Burnsville. I want to get to college hockey nowadays because, I look at your resume.
But you know what? Just going back on that though, like I think every player that ever played junior hockey it's such a time in your life where everything is fresh and new and everybody, you're so easily influenced by your surroundings. And for guys to be able to go away and go down there, like I did it. I grew up more in those 2 years playing for Wooger and St. Paul than at any
Yes.
time in my life. And I think anybody that played junior hockey would say that. My twin boys, Tommy played in the USHL and Timmy played in the North American League. And what I like to say about junior hockey when I'm educating people on it is like, like I sent with my two sons, I sent two boys to junior hockey, and junior hockey sent me back two men. That's how much that
Exactly.
that's how much growth there is during that time and during that period.
And that absolutely ties into where I was going with you being the head coach at Air Force. It's interesting because with your resume and your personality, there are a lot of places you could be. And I know that you've moved around and did so a lot in the early part of your coaching career. You got here to Colorado Springs in 1997. In your wildest dreams, Frank, did you think nearly 30 years later you'd still be at Air Force? Because that's an unbelievable run.
Well, we had bounced around, Carol and I, and had four kids, and we had bounced. We were at Rochester, and then Austin and Rochester. Then we were in Grand Forks. I was with Gino Gasparini for 2 years, and Dean Blaze up there, Kerry Eads. And then I went back to Omaha for a year, and we had a terrific year there. Then I went to Denver, and then the Denver thing didn't work out, and I ended up getting the International League job here in Minnesota. We were here 2 years, became a lame duck, and we went up to Winnipeg for a year, and then like, what was I going to do? We're bouncing around. I'm taking these kids. We were living out of a U-Haul, bouncing around all over, and actually, it's kind of funny. Kevin Constantine, who took over the Rochester job when I left, who I made sure they hired him, and obviously his career skyrocketed. He got the Penguins job in Pittsburgh, and
Yep.
he called me about coming there. And Kevin was always on the cutting edge of things, and he wanted to have like an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator. And Troy Ward was going to be his offensive coordinator, and I was going to be his defensive coordinator. And so we were on our way to Pittsburgh. That's when Mario Lemieux was making his comeback from the cancer.
Yep.
And I was scouting the International League for Winnipeg, and I was in Detroit. They used to have a college hockey all-star game where the American college hockey stars, all-stars, played against the Canadian college hockey all-stars. And Donnie Lucia, who I grew up with up on the range, he was in Grand Rapids, I was in Coyne. Luch was there, and he had recruited a ton of my guys when he was up in Alaska, and he had just taken the CC job. And I called Luch back in those days. That's when you call your buddy and, hey, you got an extra bed in your room? Yeah. Okay, I'm coming. So we're laying awake and visiting after we had a couple of beers after the game. And he goes, hey, the Air Force job just came available. Would you be interested in something like that? And I go, you know what? I don't know. I don't think that would really be for me, but hey, thanks for bringing it up. Anyway, I went home and I mentioned it to Carol. And Carol said, hey, you're always telling your players to look into all their options. Why don't you walk the walk yourself and look into it? So I said, all right. I called Donnie, and Donnie called Art Berglund, who called the AD, Randy Spetman at Air Force. And they contacted me, and I went in for an interview. I went in there not thinking that it was going to be for me at all. And I just thought I'd see a bunch of grim-faced kids goose stepping around, and but I went. We liked Colorado. We loved it when I was coaching Denver, and we went in there. And to be honest with you, I got toured around by my present assistant coach Joe Doyle, who was like a graduate assistant at the time at Air Force, and it wasn't that way at all. It was they were just regular kids, and the bright-eyed and yes sir, no sir, in the hallways and looking at you and it's smiling, and there was tons of energy around the athletic department. It just wasn't what I thought it was going to be like at all. And I called Carol and I said, they offered me the job, and we were just sick of bouncing and dragging our kids all over the place. And I go, well, maybe we should do it. We love Colorado. Let's go back. I go, I know I can make this better in a quick hurry. The program was down at the time. And so we decided to do it. I go, yeah, let's go do it for a couple of years, and then, kind of get our feet under us, and we'll take it from there. Well, freaking 27 years later, I'm still here. And And but it's a great part of the world. I get to work with great kids every day. Do I wish I had a couple Scott Blooms in my lineup? Yes. We'd have probably made a couple Frozen Fours had we would have won one more game and made a couple Frozen Fours had we had. But like I said, great place to work. It's been a good fit for me. I get to work with great kids that want to be coached, that are team orientated. And Gorgie, you've been coaching a long time as well, and like being happy and being content, like those things matter with what we do. It matters a lot.
It matters a great deal, and it's a grind. I mean, if you're gonna be a Division One coach, I can't imagine what the world is like these days. But even before we got to the portal and to the pandemic and all the different roadblocks they've put up, the challenge of bringing kids to your school is different than most. I mean, when I was at St. Thomas, we went out to play Air Force, and I was blown away with a couple of things: the beauty of that campus, and then the discipline those kids have to have. What has it been like to kind of adjust how you recruit to get kids to come to Air Force, because it takes a special kind?
Right. I mean, obviously, we need to have good students. These kids, they need to be good citizens. Um, good citizens, good students. They've got to be Americans. Like there's a laundry list of what it takes to get in there. So, as far as adjusting my recruiting, to be honest with you, like they tell you, they tell you kind of we have what we call an academic composite, which with letters of recommendation and all that, and like we don't get exceptions like academic exceptions. Like you have to make the minimum to get in there, and like I said, there's a lot to it. You got to be a good student, you got to be a good citizen, you got to be a good hockey player. Hey, you got to be an American citizen,
Yes.
which there's more Americans now. But I mean, like back in the 70s and 80s, when John Matcheffs and Chucky Delich were coaching, there wasn't as many Americans, and they were getting third tier Americans playing against these other, Denver, Michigan Tech, North Dakota, that had these 20-year-old Canadian players from junior. They had no chance at all. So now the pool is deeper, and that's really helped Army and us. But like I always said, the academics, you got to be a good citizen, you got to be a good hockey player, you got to be an American citizen. Other than that, I always say the recruiting's pretty easy.
Yeah, outside of that, everything's hunky dory. There's no problem to it. Frank? What do you think of the portal? I've had mixed opinions from college coaches I've talked to. I have my opinion. I'd love to hear yours.
Well, obviously, like I went to pro hockey years ago because I kind of had to. I needed a job, and I never really aspired to be a pro hockey coach. I always wanted to be a college hockey coach. All my coaching idols were college guys, and that's what I wanted to do. And then I went and coached pro. I was in pro for 3 years and really didn't like it. Didn't like the transaction nature of it, and I wanted to get back to college, and then didn't think it would be at Air Force, but it ended up working out that way. But I go back because I just wasn't. I was never trained in the professional game, and I never developed in the professional game. Never played in the NHL, and so college hockey is what I wanted to do. And ironically, maybe I'm getting old. I'm aging out, like we use a junior term. I'm aging out at about the right time, because this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I wanted. Um, you know, we've basically, the NCAA has professionalized collegiate athletics, and that's what I wanted to get away from in going
Right.
back to college. And with the with the rules, and there was rules to be abided by. I don't like it for a number of reasons. Number one, the transfer portal, the fifth year, COVID, it's a spectator sport to us at the Air Force Academy. My problem with it is the rich, and throwing the NIL in there too, Gorgie. Throwing the NIL. I mean,
Yep.
it's like this is just not. the rich are getting richer. And hey, it's
Yep.
never been easy at Air Force. It's never been easy at Bemidji State. It's never been easy at Northern Michigan. But now it's never been more difficult. And hey, my brother's arguably his best player was the pole camp kid that was a freshman, and they won the regular season championship, lost it in the finals to Michigan Tech. And he comes in my brother's office a couple days later and says, "I'm transferring to Denver." I mean, that would never have happened if you had to sit out a year in residence.
Yep.
He's leaving purely for hockey reasons, and it just wouldn't have happened. He would have played one more year at Bemidji, and he would have signed a pro contract. And I just don't like the fast food world that we live in. I don't like basically, what are we teaching young people? Like, when things get tough or you get a better offer, you just pack your bags and move on. I like, to me, there's something about making a commitment. What are you going to do someday in your life? We're all going to face a lot of adversity in our life, in the workplace, in our marriage. What do you do when things get tough in your marriage? You dig in and you make it better, or do you walk out the door? I don't. I don't like what it's doing to college hockey. Like I said, the rich are getting richer. Union College beat my son Tom's Gopher team in 2014. They might be the last non-power school that will ever win a national championship. I mean, Gorgie, think about it. Like, of the Big Ten, the top NCHC, Boston University, Boston College, all those top tier programs. Of the 16 teams in the NCAA tournament every year, 11 or 12 of them are going to be those teams. And you're going to have a team from Atlantic, you're going to have a team from the CCHA. But, what are really the chances of one of the have-nots, beating North Dakota in the first game, beating Boston College in the second game, beating Michigan in the third game, and you got to beat Denver in the final. I mean,
It's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
It sucks.
Yeah, and so to me, I don't think that's healthy. The other thing, Gorgie, about our sport, we're different than football and basketball. Like, we're a one-room schoolhouse. At least in football and basketball, with Air Force, I'll give you Air Force. I'll use them for example. At least they're in the Mountain West. At least all the programs that we face are Division I institutions. Some are Power 5 institutions, some are Group of 5 institutions, but they're all Division I institutions. In college hockey, we're a one-room schoolhouse. We've got powerful, glamorous Big Ten schools. Arizona State, throw them in there. Throw Boston College in there. We've got, like I said, big, powerful, glamorous Power 5 schools, but we've also got Division III institutions that sponsor it. RIT, Union. The majority of schools in Division I college hockey are Division II schools that sponsor hockey at the Division I level. So there's, like, on the food chain, there's the difference be institutional diversity. There's so much institutional diversity in hockey from the haves and the have-nots. And then you've got all these rules, and somebody does a good job at one of the lower echelon schools. And like I used the example with my brother and his player, and it's just, you know what? The big schools have always had the advantages. Now they've got a pocket full of mulligans to go with it.
Yep. I couldn't dislike the portal more than I do. I hope at some point we get together and think about developing kids that not just are great hockey players, but great people. And when great people get into tough situations, they stick it out. And this is just an easy way out. And I think it puts coaches in a horrible, horrible spot. And I just don't think we're doing anybody any good. If you want to do the NIL thing and you've got different places where these kids are playing college athletics and they're able to make some money, I'm not against that. But the portal to me sucks. And if you make them sit out a year, it'll change everything. And that's where we need to get back to. During COVID, I'm all good with it. I understood why this thing came of being, but I don't think it's a long-term solution. I think it's exactly the opposite. I think it's hurting the game.
No, and my problem with the NIL is what players, Gorgie, which players are getting the NIL money? And the answer to that is the guys and gals that are getting it are the ones that are going to get it anyway, once they
They
go on
get
to
to the
their next
pros.
career. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not like the have-nots are getting it. And trust me, college hockey. In college hockey, we've got great operators. Bobby Motzko is my best friend, and he does a fantastic job. Those guys, Mike Hastings, former player of mine, like Jeff Jackson, another old goalie. By the way, there you go. Who's the two oldest coaches in Division One college hockey? Jeff Jackson
You
and
and
Frank Serratore. Two
couple of
old go
goalies.
two old goalies, Gorgie. If you can
Yes.
if you can coach goalies, you can survive a long time.
Yep, that's fair.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I want to get back to where it started. I have a lot of friends from Grand Rapids, and I don't know if this is just them trying to get me going, or if this is folklore, or if this is legit. But you grew up in Coleraine playing for Greenway, and there's apparently a bridge that separates these two towns, and this I guess hyperbole that you hold your breath when you go from one to the other if you're from these towns, and the rivalry was that bitter back in the day. Can you verify this for me?
Oh man, Prairie River Bridge. It was the Mason Dixon line, and I like no, it was, and like the rivalries. Like we didn't play summer hockey and that stuff against each other. To be honest with you,
No.
like like so like we weren't buddies with those guys, and those guys weren't buddies with us. And I never talked to Don Lucia until he came recruiting. He was up in Alaska and came to Rochester recruiting. Jimmy Perpich, I played with the Vulcans. I remember Wooger going, "Hey, we got a guy from your town coming down. Can you take him in for a couple weeks till we find a place to play?" And I said, "Sure. Who is it?" And he goes, "Jimmy Perpich." I go, "Jimmy Perpich ain't from my town. He's from Hibbing, you know." And he goes, "Well, will you take him?" And I reluctantly took him. And then Perp comes down, and Perp and I go out, and obviously, like it didn't take 15 minutes, and we were best friends the rest of our life. We lost him a year or so ago, and what a great guy. The same thing, Donnie Lucia and I have gotten to be, such close friends over the years, but during that time when you were growing up, hey, I remember we were playing Grand Rapids, and there was the older guy, the adults would work with people from Grand Rapids. They'd work at the mill or they'd work in the mines together. And I remember Dan Travojevic coming up to me. We were playing Rapids that week, and they were loaded. I mean, they had 15 players in that team that would go on to be Division One from a freaking high school team.
Jeez.
Johnny Rothstein, Billy Baker, the DeCenzos, like Danny Lempe, like they were loaded. And anyway, Big Dan comes up to me after practice. I'm walking up because they'd work shift work, and they'd come and watch practice when they weren't working their shifts. And Big Dan goes, "Hey, Frankie, need to be good. You need to be good on Friday night. I bet my paycheck." He
Oh
bet
no.
his paycheck on the high school hockey game. Like I mean, and no, it was what a great time to grow up on the range, Gorgie. The mines were booming. Blandon's was booming. There was money. The towns were vibrant. Every weekend there was live music, and there was cars and people all over. Uh, and then the games, like we would. I graduated in '75, and Grand Rapids was loaded, and Billy Baker and Johnny Rothstein, the guys I just mentioned, and they went down. And you can ask Billy or Johnny or any Donnie Lucia, like their biggest fear in the playoffs was the IRC tournament, because like there was, I mean, I really believe that Grand Rapids won the state tournament, but Evelyn could have won it. Virginia could have won it. International Falls could have won it. I mean, it was like the lead. There was so many players, and the teams were so deep, and then the games, like they would pack, like we would just pack the arenas. And remember, people could smoke in there. There'd be a haze. There'd be up in the rafters, just a haze of smoke, and the pep bands would be playing. What an atmosphere! Even like, to be honest with you, when I went and played juniors, there was nobody except family and friends in the stands. And even when I played college, like there was I never played for the Gophers, but I mean I never played in front of crowds in college like I played in front of in high school. It was magical, man. It was a magical time.
It was. Your arena still to this day is a magical place. Like you walk in that barn with the history and the way it looks and the seats and the way they're sloped. And then, like you mentioned, you go over to Grand Rapids, they are still a high school team that even in modern days, has season tickets where they have seats assigned in their building because it got so crowded. And speaking of former goalies from that era, Jimmy Jetlin, who was on this show a couple months ago, maybe just after your time, but he played in the late 70s when they were the Halloween Machine and kind of built after those teams you're talking about as one of the real dynasties in high school hockey.
It was unreal the amount of players that they kicked out. But hey, I forgot Hibbing. Hibbing could have won the state tournament in
Yes.
'75. I'm just telling you, we weren't good enough at Coleraine. We weren't deep enough. But we had 5 teams that any whichever one was going down. Hey, how many times back in those days before they quit doing it? I think my senior year, but they had a back door, a Region 3. They would take the runner up,
I
the
remember.
runner up. The runner-up from Region 7 would play the runner-up from Region 8, and they would represent Region 3 in the state tournament. And I know, like Greenway with Antone and Tommy Peluso, we won it through the back door one year. I mean, Hibbing won it in '73, going through the back door because the Falls won it. So like that's that's how deep things were. And then you go back to the players. Jimmy Jetlin, like Jimmy was younger than me, but Jimmy was really good. Jimmy was good in everything. And Jimmy back then, he was a way better baseball player than he was a hockey player. He was a good goalie, but he was a standout pitcher for Grand Rapids. And Grand Rapids had great baseball teams. They still probably have a great. They had a guy named Bob Streeter, who was a fantastic coach that coached the high school, coached the Legion team, played on the amateur team. He was a terrific player and a terrific coach. But Jimmy was pitching. Jimmy's like 4 years younger than me, and we would play on the VFW team. We'd play on the Legion team. And then the good players would also play in the men's league, the Seaway League, with Grand Rapids, Marble, Hibbing, Ely, and the Duluth Dukes. We had a really good. But Jimmy was 4 years old. Jimmy always played up with the men in baseball, and he was a terrific pitcher. And then, ended up obviously coming down and making his name down here as a goalie for the Gophers. But no, those were the golden years of hockey and sports up on the Iron Range. They're just, now it's just hard for those schools. Grand Rapids is still pretty big. Duluth East, there's a few of them, Moorhead, but now it gets down to it gets down to a numbers game. I had the weekend off. We had a few years back in Greenway. Somehow miraculously found a way to beat Hermantown in the state finals. Jeez. And went in the region finals and came down with Dante Lawson and that crew. And I came to watch the state tournament that year, and with Greenway there, it was fantastic. And I watched the A level, and the top players in those A games were good, and you could see them, but they played pretty much the whole game, and the pace of the game was pretty controlled because of that. And I remember watching those games, and then watching the double A games at night. And I started watching the double A games. Gorgie, I thought I was watching college hockey after watching the A games, and it just tells you, how much the depth matters, and depth means, those deeper teams could play 3 or 4 lines and play at a high tempo and pace. And obviously up north there just isn't. They just don't have the depth to compete with with the top teams from the Twin Cities.
Yeah, the landscape has certainly changed. I still marvel at downtown St. Paul, and I know we go back to a time of the clear boards and the Civic Center, but there's just something sacred for any hockey fan of any age. And I'm going back to when I was a little kid, and now as I'm getting close to age 60, that weekend, and if I'm lucky enough in my duties covering the Minnesota Wild, if we're able to get back into town for like the Saturday session, or maybe there's a Wednesday or Thursday session before they kick us out of town so they can use the building, there is, Frankie, still something so special about being in St. Paul just to watch that state tournament. I don't care about playing it. I mean, just as a fan, and you mentioned it, going back to be able to watch your alma mater, it is remarkable how much fun that is.
Oh, and my point, It is it's a magical event. It always will be. The point I was trying to make is people will ask me sometimes, how come the northern teams don't do as well, aren't doing as well as they used to do? And
Depth.
it's plain and simple. I mean, they're just they just don't have the competitive to depth. But the tournaments, to be honest with you, you could have three levels if you ask me. You could have three levels of teams.
Yeah.
There's that many kids playing right now, um, and like, hey, you got those top tier teams in the AA, and then you got a few the top teams in the A. Like you could easily divide that up and have three state tournaments. There's that many good teams and good players, and to me, like I'm kind of you don't want to dilute it too much, but I'm all for spreading those experiences around. I mean, for that Greenway team to make it down that year, I mean to be honest with you, they represented everybody from northern Minnesota. They were representing, all
Yes.
the it, and it's it's cool and it matters. And I wish there was, like I said, if there could be a few more opportunities for more kids to be able to experience that, for more towns and more areas to experience that, is so much the better.
We'll close our hockey conversation with your stint. You mentioned it earlier in the International League as the head coach of the Minnesota Moose. I went back and looked at your roster from the first year you were in St. Paul, and I remember it because I was one of those North Star fans that was really having a hard time dealing with the fact that our team had been taken away. And so you guys were playing at the Civic Center. The North Stars were gone. You're the coach. In goal is Frank Pietrangelo, who had been to the Stanley Cup as recent as 1991 with Pittsburgh. Speaking of the 91 Cup, you had Stuart Gavin on that roster who played for the North Stars in that same cup. Reed Larson, legendary stud defenseman here from Minnesota. Dave Hackstall was one of your top penalty minute guys. Yeah, that guy, the guy that coached at North Dakota, now in the National Hockey League. Dave Christian from the Miracle on Ice team. And yes, Mr. Hockey himself, Larry Olam. That was quite an eclectic roster you had. What are your memories of playing the Civic Center after the North Stars left as the team in Minnesota with the Minnesota Moose?
Well, it was fun and it was new, and people didn't know a lot about what we were, and we kind of started out. They wanted to become kind of St. Paul's team, but I had fun with it. I didn't have any experience at coaching at the pro level. Had I had that to do over again, if I was going to coach in pro hockey, I would have probably wanted to go to the American League and kind of learn the trade, learn the craft, because it's different, Gorgie. Managing professional players is a lot different than managing college players. They're two different animals. But I had some really, really good guys that made that easy on me. And you mentioned Dave Christian, you mentioned Dave Hackstall, Reed Larson, uh, Larry Olam. We had a little guy from South St. Paul named Johnny Young, and was he a handy little guy? Also, don't forget we had Dave Snuggerud on that team as well.
Oh, that's
And
right.
and and what's crazy is we had Reed Larson, and we could go all day long. My God, he could still shoot the puck. That guy, like everybody can shoot everybody could shoot. Everybody can shoot now, but Reed, like his shot was a level above. Hey, you talk about shot blocking. It's everybody blocks shots now. Back then the Red Sea went open when somebody wound up from the point. When Reed Larson was winding up from the point, there was guys jumping over the glass, going for line changes. But we had David Christian, who was an NHL All-Star a few years before, Snuggy, Reed, and we had Dave Hackstall, and you know who the captain of that team was?
No.
The captain of that team was Dave Hackstall. And what a leader he was. I recruited Hack to go to North Dakota. Terry Eads and I did. And when I got that job, Hack was the first player I signed because I respected him so much as a player. Hack had an NHL mentality, an NHL work ethic. He lived clean. He just wasn't a good enough player to play in the NHL. And but I wanted him. I told Glenn Sonmore, and what a joy that was. I got to work every day with Mike Antonovich. I got to work every day. I got to go to work and see Mike Antonovich and Glenn Sonmore. They should have paid. I should have paid them. I should have paid them to do that. Like it was unbelievable. But I'm talking about the guys, Dave Christian, Reed Larson, Dave Snuggerud, Dave Caxtall, and you'd think, who was the captain? It wasn't any of the three NHL All-Stars. It was Dave Hackstall. And oh, by the way, there was nobody rolling their eyes with Hack wearing the C. It's no accident, that he's had the career that he's had.
I agree.
And ended up in these coached 2 NHL teams already. I haven't made all the best decisions in my life, but that was a good one. But no, it was a great experience, and like I said, I was lucky to have some good seasoned veteran players that helped me a little bit, and because I was young and did. David Christian and I are only a year apart in age. I mean, so
I know.
So I was really young at the time, but but the real treat was every day I would go and I got to hang out with Antone and I got to hang out with Glenn and just sitting there. And you and I like to talk, but I tell you, you couldn't help but just listen to those guys banter. And remember Gary Olson from the St. Paul Pioneer
Yes.
Press? Ole would come every day, even if he wasn't doing a story. And we would sit around for an hour before practice, and it was fantastic. And kind of that gets back to the old guard, and we're losing a lot of the old guard. Of course, Gary's gone now. Glenn is gone. We just lost Serdy. We lost Wooger. I mean, great guys, and some of the most colorful people that ever existed on the face of the planet. Glenn Sonmore was just an absolute joy to be around. And people see him on the air and on the radio, and they're going, "Is this guy for real?" That was Glenn.
For real.
It's for real.
Yeah, no.
I mean,
I got to tell you, I was obsessed with the North Stars as a kid, and so when I was covering college hockey, at the time it was Fox Sports North. He was doing the radio for Gopher Hockey. We were doing the TV side. So we would go meet with, at the time it was Don Lucia and his coaching staff with Mike Ensel. We'd sit and talk to the coaches, but then I'd always be late getting back to the press box to do the game because I would spend 15 minutes hearing Glenn tell old North Star stories. The same guy you heard on the air calling the game on the radio was the same guy you'd meet. And it didn't matter who you were. He would appreciate so much going back and telling those old stories. And I ate it up every time I saw him. I got drawn in, Frankie. What a personality. What a sweetheart of a man.
Oh, and he was the biggest Gopher homer. Obviously, my son played for the Gophers, so I'm a bit of a Bobby, my best friend, and Donnie Lucia, my great friends. I'm a Gopher homer, but Glenn was the biggest homer. I remember you'd watch a game and that wasn't a penalty. That wasn't a slash. Glenn, he just broke the guy's wrist. I mean,
he couldn't help it. He couldn't help it, Frankie. He just couldn't help it. And who's going to argue with a guy like that, right? I mean, Glenn, just a legendary guy going back to his days with the North Stars. And, I'll never forget it. Lou Nanny still talks about it. When he was the GM, Glenn was the coach, and Louis was traveling somewhere in Canada, and the North Stars were playing in the old Boston Garden. It was back when the North Stars had, I don't think they had won in the Boston Garden. I think it had been a losing streak that had covered more than a decade. And Louis talked to Glenn that morning, and basically Louis gave Glenn the green light to let the guys run loose and go out there and just drop the mitts at the drop of the puck because they were having a hard time beating this hockey team, and Boston thought they could push the North Stars around. So wherever Louis was, he was talking to one of his cohorts at a different game up in Canada, and they're like, something's going on in Boston. We still can't get a final score, and that game started 3 hours ago. And Louis looked at the guy and said, it's going to be another hour or two. Trust me, this one's going to go deep into the night. And it was. There was the night in Boston where Glenn Sonmore turned the boys loose, and it actually ended up being a real pivot point for the North Stars in their franchise's history because they would go on to play Boston later that year in the playoffs and sweep the Bruins. And Glenn loved talking about, at the drop of the puck, all 5 guys on his team basically squaring off with the Bruins to send that message.
Oh, and Glenn loved it rough and tumble. I was a college guy, and Frankie, you don't understand. We got to have some of these guys. We're in the entertainment business and this and that. And we were at an international league meeting one year, and we're sitting there, Glenn and I and all the other, and one of the owners stood up and said, we got to do something about all this fighting. And Glenn goes, yeah, we better do something about it, or we're going to have to start printing more tickets.
Now that's a good line. Oh, that's a good line. Oh my heavens. Is that Glenn or what? I mean, you talk about old school, and he, you know what? He was a tough sucker. Like, there were nights I look back watching the North Stars when he was behind the bench and he was trying to climb the glass to get at Jacques Demers. Like, he backed it up. It wasn't just send the players out. If you got in a street fight, he'd be right there with you.
Glenn just had this infectious personality that people would follow. And like Glenn's teams, like I worked with Glenn for 2 years, and X's and O's weren't his thing. But I'll tell you what, like he had a way with people. If you were playing Glenn's team, like I'm telling you better tighten your chin strap because they're coming. They're coming. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes when it gets right down to at what you rather have, a team that plays that gets after it, plays hard, or some X's and O's, like having the ability. Obviously, the best is to have that combination. But Glenn had a special way with people. Glenn, we'd always give Glenn that we'd get a complimentary first class seat in the plane. So Glenn would always be the first guy off the plane when we'd fly. Well, the first couple of trips, like Glenn would get lost all the time. Like, and he'd smack his car. He only had one eye, and he had lost his eye playing hockey. And anyway, Glenn, the first couple of road trips, we get off, and Glenn would be the first one off, and all of a sudden you just automatically follow Glenn, and then it would be like 3 or 4 minutes, and somebody going, hey, baggage is the other way. You just like you just have that infectious person. You just followed Glenn. He had that ability. Like I said, he had that personality, infectious personality. And the other thing about him, he had a way of making everybody around him feel special. And no, I miss those days. When you look back at my career with the Moose, what was the biggest thing with that? I ended up going back to college. The most important thing and the most enjoyment I had coaching at that level, there was a lot of things, but nothing more than being able to be with Glenn and be with Antone every day.
What a treat. All right, we've come to the final step here. This is the hat trick hot seat. I'm going to give you 3 quick ones, Frankie. Top of the head. There's no wrong answer. This is kind of diving behind the curtain to get to know you a little bit better. I don't know where the concert would have been, but I want to know in question 1, the band and the venue for the very first concert you attended, and then give us the year. I'm guessing it was the 70s.
I was not much of a concert guy because I played all sports and I was a big baseball player. And but the first concert I ever went to was in the Civic Center, and with my wife. We were dating at the time, and it was I think the Beach Boys.
Oh, great pick. One of my dad's all-time favorites. I 2 nights ago attended a Journey concert at the Twins ballpark down here in the Twin Cities, and it brought me back because the first concert I attended was the early 80s. Bryan Adams, Canadian, warmed up for Journey in the early 80s, and I was blown away because a couple nights ago, we're going back 40 plus years in the time capsule. These guys are still relevant. They're still out there playing. They have a couple of their original members in that band, including Neil Schon. So it is funny how, even though some of these performers are getting up there 50s, 60s, 70s, like us, they're still able to do it at a high level. And that was Target Field Monday night. Now, the best player you ever coached. And again, you might not have one, but if top of the head, I'm asking you for one of those guys that you look back and say, my goodness, this was a hell of a hockey player I coached. Who would it be?
That's a really good question. Obviously, I'll tell you, David Christian was really good.
Yes.
David was pretty much my age when I coached him with the Moose, and he had his stint in the NHL. But I'm telling you, like David could skate. Like, I mean, he could still skate he was in his 30s and probably mid 30s at the time.
He was 35 at the time. Yeah.
But Gorgie, he could still skate. Like, I mean, and we had young guys, like I told you. You had Larry Olam and Johnny Young, and we had Andy Schneider. We had some young. Hey, Snuggy could skate.
The player.
But
yes.
but but David was effortless up and down. He was just, you wouldn't really know how fast he was going until he was just going by guys. And keep in mind, in the 80 Olympic team, David was a forward for a lot of years, and then he got converted to a defenseman. And and trust me, he wasn't an average forward. I mean, he was a high end forward, and then went up and played defense on the Olympic team, and then in the NHL. And how could he do that? He could do it because he had a great toolbox. But you know what? He was a wonderful skater. I would have loved to have. I say love to have him in his prime, but I don't know how much better he could have been skating.
Right.
5-6 years earlier.
Great answer. I mean, just a great answer, because you had him at age 35. And speaking of just tremendous human beings, I've worked with him on a couple different charity events. This guy could not be a nicer guy. And again, that skill, that speed takes you back to what that 80 team was built on. They had guys like Buzz Schneider, Pavelich, Christian. These guys could all fly, and he was just one of the ones on that team. I'm not surprised at age 35, being that he played for Herb, that he could still do that. So that's a cool answer.
That was Herb's genius. I mean, because hey, at the time around 1980 and before, the Philadelphia Flyers were winning Stanley Cups, beating the crap out of people, and knowing that they'd have to play a different game in the Olympics, and the players that they took, that was a big part of Herb's genius. No question about it. Yeah.
Well, you live in a spot that I would call a great vacation spot, but at some point, you've been there for almost 30 years. You and Carol, your wife, have to get away. So what is your favorite vacation spot? Maybe it's somewhere you've been, Frank. Maybe it's somewhere you're looking forward to getting down the road that's on your bucket list. But when I say favorite vacation spot, what comes to the top of the head?
Florida. We like Florida. And
yes.
There's a reason for it. Colorado is an alpine desert, and it's really dry there. It's a beautiful part of the world. Hey, like I always tell people, the winters aren't too cold when you're from northern Minnesota. The summers aren't too hot. There's no humidity. There's no mosquitoes, and the sun shines all the time. Ultimately, they're going to get me out of there only in two ways, Gorgie. They're going to get me out of there either in a box or an urn. A box or an urn. That's the only way. But we like Florida because the water and the vegetation. We don't have. That's one thing we don't have. You have it here up in Minnesota, but you only got it for a few months a year. But so Florida is a great compliment. We love it in Colorado, and we miss our family back here. My son Tom, I'm actually at his house right now in Roseville, and we love it here and have family here. And we're going to spend a lot of time here as well. But Florida is a great compliment to Colorado, and we're probably going to work our way between those two places with some intermittent stops in the land of hockey.
I love it. Well, you've got 45 days until you start with the Falcons this year. You open up with Arizona State October 5th, so I know the countdown has begun. I can't thank you enough. I had no idea you were in Minnesota. That's so cool to connect, Frankie. And
Gorgie, don't forget about the Gophers. We got the
October 11th in Vegas. Yes,
we got Coach Motzko. We've only played once in college, and my Falcons beat his St. Cloud State Huskies, and things got so bad after that loss, he had to take the Gopher job, and so who knows, if I beat him again, he might end up with a Wild job. You never know,
Yeah, you tell Bobby you've helped him along the way every step. So this was just another part of the journey for Bob, another guy I absolutely adore. So I will, if I can't get there, because I'm likely going to be working a Wild game, I will be tuned in. That's a really fun set of teams for the Icebreaker. I was going to cover that in our next segment here on the podcast, but I got to tell you, I knew an hour wouldn't be enough, especially with a couple of goalies that like to talk. So we'll have to circle back and have part two, maybe after the college hockey season. I won't bug you during the grind of the season, but I wish you the best of luck this year, and I really do appreciate your time today.
No, my pleasure, and I enjoy you and all you do. Thanks for all you do for the game.
That's Frank Serratore, guys. The absolute best. I'll be back after a quick break to put a bow here on Wooden Sticks this afternoon. And we're back, and I've got a smile on my face. Yeah, we probably could have gone on at least another hour, and we will come back and certainly have part 2 of that hockey conversation. A lot of layers today that we got into. He validated that Greenway Grand Rapids rivalry. So now we've had a goalie on from Grand Rapids in Jimmy the Jet Jetlin, and of course today with Frankie. And you just get to hear, his passion for the game and just the way he sees the game of hockey and has for a long, long time. He's a special guy, and college hockey is lucky to have a coach like Frank out at Air Force. And of course his brother, Tom, who's a little different personality. Tom is not quite as outgoing as Frankie is, but just as wonderful a human being. And to have two brothers both coaching at big time college programs on the D1 side for men's hockey is terrific. And if you're a hockey fan, you've got some dates now to circle on the calendar. We're, as I mentioned in our conversation with Frank here at the end, a month and a half away from college hockey starting, and October 5th is sneaking up on us. They'll be at home, and if you haven't been to Colorado Springs, you owe it to yourself to get out there. They'll open up with a couple of games against Arizona State, but for a lot of people here in the Twin Cities that listen to the show, you definitely want to try to get to Vegas on October the 11th for that icebreaker, as the Gophers will play Air Force. 4 great teams out there, unbelievable venue, and yes, it's Las Vegas, so you're going to have a great time when you go to the icebreaker this year in early October. So appreciate Frank coming on, and looking forward here to the next couple of weeks as we inch a little bit closer to Wild training camp, and we'll have some guests involved on that side. As I mentioned, Bill Guerin on that short list as well. Once again, thanks to Frank Serratore. Appreciate you listening. I know we went a little bit long today. Thanks for hanging with us, and we're back next week with more great hockey content here on Talk North with Wooden Stocks.